much. You know, it's really appropriate. I'm going to start with a story, which I think the timing is actually really perfect, because this story I'm going to share happened about 3 years ago. And it takes place up at the Gunks. Anyone familiar at all with the Gunks up in New Paltz? Yeah, I don't know if you've gone hiking. It's a terrific area to go hiking. And my wife and I, as Sumit said, we live in the city. And, as you know, living in Manhattan, you get pretty busy, particularly in the fall time. So we normally get stuck in the city. We don't go out to enjoy the leaves. And about 3 years ago, I said to my wife, Deborah, Deborah, let's go out. Let's really enjoy the leaves. And what we'll do is we'll take a day off from work, and we'll go during the middle of the week so there are no leafers around. We don't have to worry with the traffic or anything. And we'll just explore the leaves and the wonderful fall season. So we went up. This is a picture. I didn't take this picture, but it represents what the Gunks look like during the fall season. It's absolutely beautiful. So we're really charged, and we go up and we drive up there, and it's only 2 hours away, so it's a perfect drive. And we plan everything out. And of course, as we get up there, we're driving halfway through, we get a flat tire. So what do? We have to spend most of the time, the rest of the day, fixing the flat tire, getting it repaired. And by the time we get up to the Gunks, it must be, I don't know, it must be like 3:30 in the afternoon. So that's pretty late. Remember, it's fall. It gets dark early. So anyway, we decide, we dump our luggage in the bed and breakfast, and we head right to the state park. And this was amazing, particularly if you have a car in Manhattan. We have a car in Manhattan. You'll appreciate this. We drove into the state park, and we saw one of the largest parking lots in the world. I mean, all these spaces, and there was nobody there. It was the middle of the week. There was nobody there. So what did we do? We parked right up, pulled right up to the trailhead, and we began our hike. And it's just a beautiful day. There wasn't even a cloud in the sky. The air was crisp. The leaves were golden red. And it was just beautiful. My wife and I, we're hiking along, and we're holding hands, and we're laughing, and we're just having a really great time. And all of the tension, all of the anxiety, all of the stuff that builds up over the day, the week, the month, all of it just dissipated out. Gone. And we were having such a good time that we didn't even see that it was getting dark. And all of a sudden we realized, hey, it really is getting dark. It's like 5:30, 6 o'clock. We better head back to the car, because if we don't get back to the car, we're going to be lost in this national state park. So what do? We go back to the car, and we said, we're feeling so good. Let's just go to the restaurant. We'll have a great meal, bottle of red wine. We'll have a great time. Yeah, let's do that. Turn on the car, turn on the lights, back out of the slot, go to the exit, and coming up right to the exit, about to go out of the state park, is a big chain blocking the exit. So we're sitting there in the car, kind of, what do we do? Now, all these, if you were observing us, you would just see two people sitting in a car with kind of these perplexed look on their faces. But meanwhile, we have all these thoughts going on, like, hey, why didn't we leave earlier? And what do you do? What do you do? This is a national state park. Who do you call? And I'm thinking, I'll let my wife call. My wife is thinking, I'll let Andy call, And all of a sudden, we get into these silly little arguments. And I can't take it, so I back up the car, and I see this chain, 2 posts, and I'm going to go up the side of the post, around the side of the post. And there's a little hill, so I start to go up that. And as we go up that, Deborah yells, Andy, stop the car. So I stopped the car. I said, Deborah, what is it? She said, Andy, look, those rocks. If you go up, you're going to kill the carriage of the car. And you know what the worst part was? She was right. So I had to back up, right? Back up. And now we're sitting there, and everything's ruined. I mean, that's how we're feeling. We're now tense. We've got a little silly argument. It's just that feeling of like, oh, this is terrible. Nothing's going right. Now, Deborah says something. She says 3 little words that change everything. Everything. And what are those 3 little words that she says? Well, before I tell you that, let's go into a little bit of what was going on. Now, think about this. Thinking, and you do it all the time. All of you are thinking right now. Most of all of that process is invisible. The person next to you doesn't know what's going on in your mind. So there was a gentleman named Chris Argyris, who's one of the management gurus. He's a professor at Harvard. He's no longer with us. But he created what is called this mind map. It's a ladder of inference. Now, there are many, many different explanations for the process for thinking. But this one is actually quite popular. And I think it makes sense. So we have rungs on a ladder, and we start with what is called the data pool. You know, you have data, your experiences, and that feeds into, from there, you select certain data. This is in your process of thinking. This is in the process of making a decision, which is what thinking is all about, making a decision. So you have that, and then you kind of align the meaning, and then the middle one, you have the assumption. This little rung, the middle rung of the ladder is the assumption. And then from the assumption, well, you draw conclusions, and then you adopt your beliefs, and you take your actions. You take your actions. Now, I want to point to the role of the assumption. The role of the assumption is a universal. It's a universal part of this thinking process. An assumption is basically something you treat as a truth rather than a belief, but it really more is a belief. Most assumptions actually are taken for granted. Now, I'm excluding, for example, insurance assumptions, certain scientific assumptions. These are the assumptions we make during the course of our daily decision making, is what I'm referring to. And many of the assumptions are subconscious. You're not even aware that you're making them. And that actually has a benefit, because if you had to stop and examine every assumption, then you couldn't exist. The world would stop. So they serve a very, very important element in the decision-making process, but it can get you into all kinds of trouble. So what did my wife say to me? What were the 3 words that changed everything? So remember, let's go back, sitting in the car, it's pitch black, the lights are on, this chain, 2 posts, stuck in a national state park. And Deborah says to me, she says, Andy, where's the lock? And I said, hey, yeah, where is the lock? And I go outside, and I go to the chain, and I go up and down the chain, and all it is, it's a chain. It's just connected to 2 posts. So I unhook one of the posts, and I walk back to the car, and I'm smiling, and underneath the windshield wiper, an 8x10 piece of paper, it says, if you leave the park after 5 o'clock, make sure you unchain chain the post and chain it back. Okay, so my wife and I saw a chain. What was our assumption? Locked, right? We're locked out. And because of that, what did that do? What did it create? Tension. It created tension. Now, who was responsible for creating that tension? Who was responsible for that reality? Was it the chain, or was it my wife and I? It was my wife and I. You see, that is the power, the role of the assumption that can take, and it happens instantaneously. Instantaneously. Now, when I talk about assumptions, particularly to groups like yourselves, very bright, very successful, there's a lot of people in the group who are thinking about this assumptions and saying, this is not necessarily me. So I wanted to show you, many of you participated. We had a really nice response to this survey that went out prior to this talk. And we're going to share with you some of that information. Now, these little pie charts up here represent, one is what your perception of the role of the assumption is in your kind of decision-making process. The other is, how do you perceive your assumptions? How do you judge your assumptions? And the other is the frequency of which you make assumptions. Now, I have to say, on paper, this is a very healthy-looking group. Okay, you recognize the role of the assumption. You recognize that you make them often, but there are probably about 1/4 of the group that doesn't really believe that. They don't believe they make assumptions on a daily basis. But overall, I'd say it's fairly healthy. But that is on paper, because I think you're fairly introspective and you're willing to look at things differently. But that's different when it applies to yourself and to your business. And that's what we're going to talk about. Let me share that with you. So the title of this talk is called Challenge Your Assumptions, Change Your World. It's a pretty bold title, but I really believe it, and I've seen it. Once you change, all of a sudden, you change an assumption, it can shift everything. It can open it up. But as I said, a lot of people have a hesitancy. They think, you know what, I don't make assumptions because I'm too smart to make assumptions. But the point is, it doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter about your IQ. It doesn't matter about your level of success. We all make assumptions. Aaron Ralston. Anyone know Aaron Ralston? He's the hiker who had to sever his arm off because when he was hiking, he got caught between two rocks, and he severed his arm off. And on the Today Show, I believe it was the Today Show, they said, "What was your biggest concern?" And Aaron Ralston said, "My biggest concern, it was going to the hospital because I'm afraid of needles. I didn't want to get a shot." You might know this gentleman, Orville Wright, one of the founders of, he and his brother, founders of modern aviation, though if you watch the Olympics, the Brazilians may disagree with you on this one, but they're pretty much given the credit for founding modern aviation. And when he was suggested, because you know most of their stuff took place in farm fields, because that was the widest space that was available. And farm fields are, you know, they're full of cow dung and they're rocky and stony and uneven. Someone said to him, "Hey, why don't you just kind of like put some surface on top?" And he immediately said, if man has to smooth out the runway, he does not deserve to fly. And this is Houdini, Harry Houdini, one of the great escape artists in the world, right? He could get out of anything. So here's a great story. Houdini's driving with his friend in a new car, a new modeled car. And Houdini is there, his friend's driving the car, Houdini's in the center, his wife, I think who was pregnant, is off to the side, on the other side, and they're driving along, and the friend pulls up, parks, and gets out of the car. And he's walking away. And he turns around, and he looks back, and Houdini's still in the car. So he goes back over to the car, and he knocks on the door, and Houdini, I don't know if he rolls the window down or something, but they get in a conversation. He says, "Well, come on out." And Houdini says, "I can't. I don't know how to get out of this car." And so Houdini even laughed. He said, here's a man who I can get out of any container, any weight, any size, and could someone show me how to get out of this goddamn car? Okay, so Aaron Ralston, he could cut off his own arm, but he had a fear of needles. Orville Wright could conceive of making something fly in the air, but immediately dismissed the idea of a tarmac. And Houdini was stymied by one little change of a design. And they're all connected because along the way, they made certain assumptions that fed what I call into their comfort zone. You see, we all have a different comfort zone. And when we're in that comfort zone, hey, anything can happen. We operate really, really well. But today, as you know, and you live it every day, the pace of the technology, the pace of the economy, the pace of the environment, everything is moving and shifting very, very rapidly, which demands that not just people that are in a technology business, but everyone has to be constantly able to move out of their comfort zone. We're being forced. We don't even have a choice. You don't have a choice. You have to move out of your comfort zone. But the problem is we don't like it. There are all these different axes on a comfort zone. There's fear, there's the unknown, there's a new experience, there's the inconceivable. And when we're faced against that, those axes, what we do is we want to come back into our comfort zone. But we can't just move back into our comfort zone. That wouldn't be cool. I mean, I don't like it. I'm going back into that comfort zone. No, that doesn't work that way. What you do is you find a number of assumptions which then allow you to justify moving back into that comfort zone. And that's what you do. You use your assumption to move back into your comfort zone. And once you're in it, all those assumptions, they seem perfectly clear. They're perfectly justified. But the problem is now they've acted as a barrier for you moving forward. They act as a barrier for you being able to change. They act as a barrier to propel you into areas you want to go, but you're uncomfortable doing. So the key is to be able to, one, be able to recognize that you make assumptions without judgments. That is actually one of the most important things. Most of us, we'll say, okay, assumptions like the survey showed, assumptions are okay, they're good. But you know, most people, when I really start talking to them, and I recognize or identify assumptions they make, they say, oh, I shouldn't have made that. Oh, that was silly. See, they're judging themselves for making it. Once you start judging yourselves, you no longer have the freedom to actually make them. So the key is just accept it. They're not good or bad. They're as natural as breathing. They are a rung on the ladder of inference. Okay, now the next term, once you recognize that, is called an assumption. Now the assumption is a term I made up. You can use any phrase you want. After actually doing some research and test marketing it in groups, the assumption actually sticks. There will be some people here that will use the assumption within the next hour or 2 hours. But the assumption is a very, very simple idea. The assumption is basically that you're recognizing that you make an assumption. It's training your mind to recognize that when you're stuck at a certain junction, that is your assumption that is keeping you back, like that chain is keeping you back. That the reality that you feed into that assumption, the reality, the power you give that assumption, hey, you know what? Maybe there's some truth behind it, but maybe it really is more of a belief than my actual truth. And so that is an assumption. In my terminology, you hear me use the term, my assumption is this. I'm just recognizing that what I'm saying is not a fact. It is more of a belief. And it also serves as a mental function for me to be able to surface those to the top. Now, the next question is, how do you know? If most assumptions are subconscious, how do you know you're even making it? Well, if most leaders, you can see this, leaders have an expression that the assumption is the mother of all screw-ups, to be polite. So we've created a thing called DAD, the counteractive of that. And DAD is the Dangerous Assumption Database. And it's what we found is one of the easiest ways to identify that you're making an assumption is to be able to just hear yourself saying certain words. And those act as verbal cues. So we have an intensive database now of all these verbal cues that people say in different categories, from leadership and marketing and sales, technology, cybersecurity, and so forth. And we look at those. So here's one. I don't have time. Now, as part of this process, we did something a little bit interesting for this talk. We decided instead of myself just coming up and giving a talk, what we would do is we would actually have some sessions with some Googlers and give them an opportunity to test out some of the thinking that's going on here and give them an opportunity to maybe surface some of their assumptions and then see if it could make a difference. And so from the survey, we had a number of people, a really good number of people who volunteered to actually do some coaching sessions with me. And we got it down to about 10 people. And from those 10 people, we actually did phone interviews. I did phone interviews with them. And we spent about 30 minutes together. And we tried to identify certain issues and talk about certain problems. And I tried in that short period of time to get them to identify some of those assumptions and then be able to turn around and challenge it. From those, we got down to 5 people who were really, really, really nice. Let me just read their names because I don't think everyone is here. Arturo Fagundo, right? Richita Podar, right? We have Brooke Taylor is here, all right? We also had Stanka Ilkova, who participated. I don't know if Stanka is Stanka here? Oh, Stanka's there. And Ryan Vernon, who can't be here. He's in Mountainside today. And then we spent an hour with each of these. And then we looked at them and we made some of them into these little short videos. And the idea is for you, we thought it might be better than me just talking about it, be able to hear from your peers on some of these issues and some of their thoughts. So one of the first from the DAD is, and it's very popular, I don't have time. I don't have time to X, Y, and Z. And in Arturo, we're going to show a video in a second. When I spoke to Arturo, we had a conversation. And Arturo is an engineer and relatively new here at Google, but has been through a situation where he has been commuting a lot. And in another job, he commuted quite often. And he found that because of the commute, and he has 2 kids, and he has a fairly extensive job, that he didn't have time to exercise. And I did comment when you see him, because we're going to have some of the people come up actually for some panel questions and discussions. Arturo's looks in pretty good shape. So I asked him, why are you concerned? He said, well, because I know what happened. I gained a lot of weight when I was doing this, and I like to run the marathon. So we began to talk. Now, this is something I think most people run into, whatever it is. You want to lose weight, you want to take up a hobby, you want to learn a new language, you want to learn a piece of music, you want to play in a band, or you want to spend more time at work. I don't know, whatever it is. He said, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time for this. We find that I don't have enough time. There is a reality of time, but it's really about the distribution of that time that is the reality. It's not that you don't have the exact time to do something. It's that you have an assumption that what you are going to do, it's going to take up a certain chunk of time, and that's how much you need in order to do it. So you need X number of time to get from A to B. And that's what we began to talk with Toro about. Why do you think you need all this time? So we cut into the video here. We've edited down the hour session. This is a little 2-minute piece on helping Arturo think about, first, the aspect was, why do you think you need just an hour for exercise? Can you see that as an assumption and challenge it? And then that led into his thinking about, yeah, maybe I can break it down into different units or something. I'll let him talk about it a little bit more if you'd like. And then it started with, well, tell me your thought process on your job. How do you handle a problem on your job? Can we have the video?
Is the challenge that they're all maybe good choices, or you're not sure, there's no way to evaluate at that moment?
Well, so first of all, just to figure out if one is a good choice or not, it could take a day. If you've got 5 or 6 different options, that means you can invest a week. I end up asking around, like, you know, which tool should I use to manage this little widget? And
is there a community to do that?
So maybe perhaps because I'm new to the company, I don't know which communities to go to ask those questions, but I've figured out that most of these services have mailing lists. And what I do is I actually look at the user's mailing list for the service, and I look for mailing lists that have got recent, that are busy. So if people are actively asking questions about the service, also a strong indication that it's popular and is under current development.
It's really interesting because you found a way to deal with an issue within your comfort level. When we move out of our comfort level, what happens is we feel it makes us uncomfortable, it brings up a lot of doubt or fear or whatever. Mm-hmm. So we use our assumptions to pull us back into our comfort level. Can you take that same thinking and apply it to the exercising?
That's interesting. Yeah, I had not thought about it in that regard.
My assumption is there are probably, I'll guess, 20% of the people who run marathons who are in your exact position. And somehow figured out how to do it. Kids, commute, demanding hours. So I'm thinking, why not use that same kind of research that you're able to do for your internally? Exactly.
Right. Yeah, that sounds perfectly rational. My guess is that there are people here at Google who run marathons who have long commutes, and they may even have families at home. It would be interesting to find out how they manage their time.
So this is an example here where you are breaking down the assumption that you don't have the time. You're breaking that down and questioning one from a unit perspective, but then you're also giving yourself the opportunity to solve what seems to be, we've all been there. I just don't have the time for it. It's an insurmountable problem. All of a sudden, you can use the same thinking you're solving problems in your work. You can be using it for your own personal life. Let's talk here that this is a very pertinent one in Google. The data speaks for itself. You're a data-driven company, and you are obviously believers in that data, and you sell that data, and you think that if the data is there, the data is proof. And therefore, if it's proof, everybody should think the same way. They should follow that data. The data speaks for itself. But the reality is when you're dealing in interpersonal relationships, and particularly like in the areas of sale, well, the person you're selling to may not be thinking exactly the same way. They may not have that ability to interpret data, to internalize that data, and to really sense this is right, this is spot on. Because you'll see the world thinks that everyone thinks just like they do. We all do that. It's a natural thing, but the reality is it doesn't. So Rachita shared some stories with me about some of the challenges. It started off, we were talking about the challenge of really being able to have the time to think big ideas. So she's involved in sales strategy, and she needs to spend time on the big ideas, but she was talking about that she was actually spending more time taking care of those little, like emails and those little things, because she felt she needed a certain amount of time for that big idea. Is that correct? And not only that, here's another one, which not surprised. If you have a big idea, even though you're encouraged to experiment and so forth, you want that idea to be perfect. And so you're looking for that perfect solution. Two assumptions being played here. So let's take a look here at Rachita and I in a conversation talking about clients and seeing things through the client's eyes. Whoop, hold on, let me go back. We run this video?
Tell me about maybe some of the assumptions your clients make in terms of pushing back with a new idea.
Yeah, the hardest one to deal with is like they're always like a little wary of Google. What is Google trying to do with my data? Or is there something, some new product you're going to build that you're going to compete with us where this will, you know, create vulnerabilities? And I mean, that's happened in the past. So they're always a little skeptical every time we go with a new opportunity.
Your task, you have to create something new, something creative, right? So if you think of it as circle, so starting at the top is the task, new, in which you create a new idea. You present that new idea. So that's in the 6 o'clock. You're presenting the new idea. Now, when you present something new, to most people, that is something that requires them to make a commitment or to spend extra money. What do you think, if you had to describe an emotion that goes on, what emotion does that kick off?
Fear, I guess.
Fear, right?
Yeah.
Fear, and anxiety.
Yeah.
So if you have a new idea and it generates anxiety, how are they gonna eliminate that anxiety?
By refusing or rejecting the new idea.
That's right.
Yeah.
Part of that development of the new idea is your enthusiasm, your belief behind it. The assumption is, this is great, I'm excited about it. What do you think the assumption is for your bringing into that?
They should hopefully be excited and happy and yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We tend to see the world through our eyes.
Right.
And because of that, and I mean, it sounds really silly to say this. We think the world should act like we do. So we're excited about an idea, we're excited about an idea. You know, if we don't like an idea, we think no one else likes the idea. Or if they do like it, they're stupid or dumb or whatever.
Right.
So the aspect is, part of the development of creative idea is to be able to manage anxiety in order to sell that idea through.
Okay.
Because you have to break the circle of anxiety.
I mean, I guess one thing we can do is frame the problem before even presenting the idea. So the ideas are generally solutions to something that need to be fixed, or even if they don't need to be fixed, they could be better. So we could frame the problem and say, hey, we think there is an opportunity here for us to improve X, right? And so at least then they get in the frame of mind to be thinking about ideas themselves, to be open to ideas, to be open to different ways of doing it. So kind of just really getting them bought in to that solution, because then, you know, then it's not something new that's coming in, it's something that they're already thinking about and they're already trying to solve for.
Something Rachita said I think is very important. I'm just going to pass on this, go over this very quickly, because it's called pre-engagement. So when you're in a situation where you're going to present data, and your assumption is the data is really strong, but the assumption is it speaks for itself. One of the greatest ways to sell in any kind of information is to create a little storyline or something that creates a little suspense before you actually present it. You pre-engage that individual. A simple example would be like Nike's ID, where you can go on and you create your own sneaker or shoe before you actually buy it. You know, so you're pre-engaging that customer. You're pre-engaging your leader. You're pre-engaging your manager. So these are just something you might want to think about. The last one we're going to talk about in terms of from the dad is this one. This is from Lazarus Bach's book. If your goals are ambitious and crazy enough, even failure will be a pretty good achievement. So, Google here is famous for, supposedly encouraging failure and so forth. But the reality is that failure itself is a giant assumption. It is a big red flag. And this showed up in the survey. If you want to just take a look at this, is that we asked people, in Google, if you fail, how do you think your peers are going to perceive you? And one is, I'm very fearful. Two is I have a lot of fears. So there is a lot of fear of how your peers are going to judge you if you fail. And then we asked you, how are you going to feel about yourself? That blue is, I'm going to feel pretty bad about myself. The majority of people, even though you live in an environment that says, try it, if you fail, it's okay, we encourage you to fail, there are conflicting assumptions that are going on here. And this is really important. I raise this because failure is a key element in your business, whether it's in technology or in sales. And you have to, or I'm suggesting, you really see it as an assumption failure and begin to see it, surface it, and give yourself a chance to challenge it. We'll talk just a little about that process. So let me just give you one little quick story about how this kind of applies. This is called the spin pop. This was one of the first, I believe it's called an interactive toy back in 1990, 92, I think. And this guy created this toy. This is a lollipop. You put this lollipop, the lollipop sells for 25 cents a dollar. Put it into this item here and allow it to spin. And now you can charge $4.99. Brilliant, brilliant idea. And it was so brilliant, the guy who owned this company sold it, made a ton of money, and he went off to retire. But he really didn't want to just retire. He loves mass market products. So he went to the supermarket with two other guys, and they went up and down the aisle, and they decided, what we can make? What's something new we could do? And they came to the toothbrush section, and they said, this is kind of cool, toothbrush. It's growing, because, the toothbrush always seems to get larger and larger. But they said, if we make another toothbrush, big it long, wide, bristles, whatever, we're going to be like everyone else. How can we be different? We'll create an electric toothbrush for under $5. For under $5. Now, you have to remember, there are people out there that manufacture and make and are the experts. They're the Oral-B, the Sonicare, and they have all kinds of assumptions. Like, hey, we're the experts. We know how to do this. I'm sure you've heard this around your office space. Oh, we're the experts. They're the experts. I'm the expert. I know what I'm doing. In other words, the cost to make this is prohibitive. You can't do it. $5? No, it costs $75. We sell these for $75 to $150 electric toothbrushes. You can't do that for that price. We are the smartest. We are the smartest. If we say it can't be done, it can't be done because we're smart. The end user will never buy it. They'll never get it. Electric toothbrush for that money? No, forget it. If it could have been done, it would have been done already. So these are a number of assumptions that pop up. John Osher, whose company created this, the Spin Pop, partnered with Procter & Gamble, and what they created was the Crest Spin Brush. The Crest Spin Brush. And they launched this spin brush for $4.99. And this was one of the most successful product launches in the history of packaged goods. And John Osher knew something very interesting. This was placed on the counter, right? Why would this be on a counter when you went into a store? Why would it be on this level versus this level? Kids. And when kids see a red button, what are they going to do? They're going to press it. And when they press it, what are they going to do? They're going to buy it. Hey, Mom, Dad, I want this. So John Osher said to Procter & Gamble, we have our advertising all set. They said, no, wait a minute. We're the experts, and we're Procter & Gamble. We're the experts. We do this kind of stuff for a living. We know what to do. He said, we're going to do a big advertising campaign. Procter & Gamble is going to throw $100,000 into a big advertising campaign. He said, no, you don't understand. We have the advertising right here. So he challenged Procter & Gamble, who are the smartest marketers in the world. And what did he do? He said, we'll create a little button. It says, try me. Because if an adult presses this button, what are they going to do? They're going to buy it. This product was so successful that John Osher, from the conception to 18 months later, they created, executed, went into the marketplace. He invested $1.5 million, $1.8 million in that, his own personal money with two other guys. 18 months later, Procter & Gamble bought him out for $475 million. There is an immense power in challenging assumptions. So let me just conclude here. Within every decision lies an assumption. Within every decision lies an assumption. And this is something, you just take a quick look at. These are some of the assumptions that you and your peers are dealing with. These are some of those assumptions. And so the key is I want you to be able to recognize some of these assumptions. Kind of make a little bit of an antenna. Raise them up. Make some assumptions. Give yourself permission to make some assumptions because there's a tremendous power in it. And the process is simple. First of all, assumptions are neither good nor bad. You make them. Don't judge yourself or others for making them. Encourage others to make them and then show them the way. Then the assumption is the way. You raise the awareness, you raise that assumption to a conscious level, from the subconscious to the conscious. Then you have a decision to make. You now are making something, you say, hey, what do I do with it? Do I challenge it or leave it go? I kind of say, leave it unchecked. Many times it's worth it. Or do I kind of challenge it? Do I check it? And if I check it, you can go the safe way, which is just consider it. That's an interesting assumption. You can explore it. Let me take it a little bit further. Or the fastest way to create new ideas is to identify your assumption and then reject it. Because it closes the door from any present thinking. It propels you forward. It propels you forward. So before we bring the panel up, I want to thank you for your time. I know it's lunchtime. If you would like some of the, be on the list for some dads, we have a little mailing list. Just send me an email. You can send me an email at my address at andy@andycohen.com. You can connect with me. And I love people share stories all the time. So we're starting an assumpt.com website. We're now starting and we're going to curate stories of people making assumptions. Also, after this, there's books to be, I think there's a discounted price or something at the back. And if you'd like, I would do some signing. And so I'm going to sign off with one last little message to kind of hone in on what we talked about. I'm going to do a magic trick, and I'm going to make this Coke bottle disappear. Watch. Watch. Look at that. Oh, I'm getting some laughter. I'll do it again. I'll do it again. Take the Coke bottle. Put it in the bag. And I'm going to make it disappear. Now, I know what you're all doing. See how fast you make an assumption? You're all assuming that I am holding the Coke bottle, right? That's just, you don't even think that you're making that. Excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me. So, see, maybe it's worthwhile to turn that assumption into an assumption. He's holding the Coke bottle. That's an assumption. Maybe it turned into an assumption. Okay, and my assumption is he's holding the Coke bottle, but maybe I will challenge that. If I challenge it, maybe he has a special bag. Maybe he has a special bottle. Maybe he did an amazing form of misdirection. Maybe he hypnotized all of us at the same time. You see, when you take your assumptions, surface them, turn them into assumptions, that gives you a power that you didn't have before. And that's when the magic of innovation and better decisions happens. Thank you very much. And I think we're going to bring up the panelists.
All right, folks, at this moment, we'll invite those Googlers who participated in coaching sessions with Andy up onto the stage just to do a quick discussion about the process that they went through and anything that was interesting or exciting for them. At the same time, we also have some mics in the stands here, so if there's any questions you guys have, feel free to come up to the mics and just line up there. And at the end of that, we'll kind of address questions. Yeah. Cool. All right. Back to you, Andy. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Do we have any questions? Well, maybe do you want to just talk briefly just about the experiences we've had and describe maybe what you do and.
Sure. Yeah. Hey guys, my name is Brooke Taylor. I am on the GMS agency brand team, which is in the sales org.
Hi, I'm Ruchita, and I'm a strategic partner lead in the PBS organization.
My name is Arturo, and I am a software engineer in CorpEng.
Okay. And Brooke, can we start with you? Could you talk a little about the experience of us working together, and maybe some of the things you maybe did try, hopefully tried something, or?
So what Andy and I discussed was the fact that during big pitches, I often go in with the assumption that my team and I need to be loved for our insights. And my assumption is that I need to come to the meeting and to the pitch with data that's going to dazzle them. And as such, I need to kind of figure out what that data is and what that key insight is going to be. And then kind of going to your story, I assume that that data is really going to kind of win the business for us. And one thing that you helped me push on was, you asked me, have I ever asked them during the pitch when I'm showing them the data and they're just kind of smiling and nodding and not really asking questions about it, and not really engaging with it, and it's not the type of conversation that I want to be having. Have I ever asked them, well, what insight would you want to have instead? Or what data can I show you that would change your mind? And those are the types of questions that I hadn't been asking based on my assumptions. So I plan on doing that on November 9th when we do a follow-up pitch.
Great, thank you. And Rachita, you were talking about the development of your kind of big ideas and having enough time. We talked about that. Could you talk about the...
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first time we spoke, we talked about how part of the job is just doing the tactical emails and so on and so forth, and part of it's really outlining big ideas that could be game-changing for the relationship we have. And so, we talked a little bit about having a fear and having some anxiety around starting to work on those ideas. And so it's like, okay, in the morning, it's like, well, should I start on this and I could end up spending a full day working on this, or should I start off with the smaller tasks? And then what happens is very often you keep working on the smaller tasks and you keep working on the smaller tasks, and before you know it, it's like 6 p.m. and they're like, wait, now I'm not in a frame of mind to work on the big idea because I'm tired.
Has anyone experienced that? Can we raise a hand just so Rachita doesn't feel like she's alone in this? All right. Looks like most of us have gone through it, yeah. So anything, I think you came up some solutions, didn't you?
Right. So one of them was just, so I think, Andy, you had a really good point. It's like, what is it around? And a big part is this is around time, that I need 2 or 3 hours of uninterrupted time to work on this to actually get somewhere meaningful. And then the other one was around, I need to be in this perfect frame of mind where I'm feeling motivated and creative and productive and all of those things. And those were 2 big things kind of holding me back. And so I think the thing that I started doing after a conversation is maybe saying, I'm going to work on this for half an hour, and maybe I won't make any progress, but let me just carve out half hour in the morning to start on the stuff that I otherwise don't get around to. And then, what I realized was once I put in that half hour, firstly, you can get a lot done in half an hour. And then the other idea is once you kind of started, it's easy to pick up when you have 20 minutes of time between meetings or at other times, and you don't really need 2 or 3 hours of uninterrupted time or this huge chunk when you're at your best. You can get a lot done even if those things aren't true.
Thank you. Vitor?
Yeah, sure. So we talked a lot about my assumption that I needed a certain amount of time for myself, and given a lot of the other constraints on my schedule, I really can't carve out an hour at a time, 3 to 4 times a week, to do sort of basic exercise and deal with personal health issues. So what Andy suggested was that I look for ways to take advantage of the sort of niches of time that I do have, and the assumption that I had been making was that, well, if I can't carve out the full hour, there's no point in doing anything. I might as well just stay home. And he maybe challenged that assumption. I think we met about a week and a half ago, and so I made a conscious effort to actually take advantage of some of the time I have early in the morning and in the evenings. And so for example, this morning I ran instead of running for 40 minutes, I ran for 20 minutes on the treadmill. And actually, I felt pretty good after those 20 minutes. I felt tired. I felt like it was actually beneficial.
Great. And it was when we were filming this, I think Matthew, who did all the great filming and editing on this, ended up telling Vitor that there's a marathon group within Google, and they got in a conversation that you could tap into to ask them, because there's got to be people there that have that problem. Well, we have someone bold enough to ask a question here.
All right. My question is, when you fail, like people assume that you are bad, right? Like that's kind of a barrier for people to try new things. So how do you get others to challenge their assumptions? And
you want, so wait, let me ask you a question first. How do you feel about it when you fail?
When I fail?
Yeah.
I'm usually okay with that because I know that in certain, it depends on what area you are.
It depends on what it is, right?
Yeah, if you're doing like a trivial work and you fail, that's bad. If you're in a complex area, you gotta try different things, so it's okay to fail. So it's very contextual, but.
Okay, so it's a really good question. So this is an issue, particularly in the survey it showed up that in Google has become a much more complex place to work in because it's gotten so much larger, so much bigger. And because of those complexities, it gets more layered and trying to understand who's the decision maker. If I do something, who has the influence, who's going to recognize it? I mean, who's going to recognize the merit and so forth. So sometimes there are real failures. So if you're in England and you step off the street, you look the wrong way because you used to be in the States, and you get hit by a car, well, that's a permanent failure. I mean, you die. I mean, you're not going to get around that. But outside of that, most failures in reality are really a management of assumptions. So one of the ways to manage failure is to manage the assumptions around those failures. If you're able to, before you present something, I mean, I've done this myself. I've learned the hard way. I once had when I had my advertising agency, we did a major television campaign in which the results were measurable. And it flopped. It was terrible. And we had a meeting with 5 of the key people from the client side. And I called up the CEO and I said, listen, can we cancel that meeting? Why don't we just meet? So we met. He canceled the meeting. We met. And I told him. I said, numbers didn't come through. And he didn't care. He said, okay, they didn't come through. Why? And we kind of dissected. He was disappointed, and it was up to the point of discussing if there'd be more money there to spend on the media. But you know what? That was the end of our relationship. It was the end of the relationship. Because he said, why did you cancel this meeting? You made me look bad in front of your people. I thought I was going to make him look good because I was going to just present these results, but I was only looking at it from my perspective. I saw it as if I failed, or my agency failed, and I was bringing him bad news. His was, this happens, and you just made me look bad in front of my people by canceling a meeting. The point is, I didn't align those assumptions behind it. Half the time, failure has nothing to do with the actual data itself. It has to do with the expectations of the other people. So you asked, how do you counter it? You have to go in, understand what their assumptions are in terms of their expectations, and to be clear as you can in understanding what they are, because they may be very different than yours. And I'm not saying that's going to eliminate their reaction to failure, but I think that it will enhance the ability to make a much smoother transition and a conversation going through. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yes?
I find for myself the most difficult part in sort of checking my assumptions is realizing that I'm assuming things, right? It's like in the moment I'm just going along with my thought process and I sort of mentally skip that step of making all sorts of assumptions. Do you have any tips for how to remember in the moment or how to realize, hey, maybe you're making some assumptions that should be checked?
Yeah, those goes back to what I call the verbal cues. So I'll give you an example that this is something I use personally. Business is tough. Business is hard right now. I mean, I think it's a lot of the principles that I use to generate a business, to grow a business, those fundamentals aren't applicable anymore. And so I found myself at times where I was applying those fundamentals saying, it's not going to work. I can't do it. We can't do it. And then I say, every time I say that, I realize that is a giant assumption. It's not that I can't do it. Not that we can't do it. Maybe I don't want to spend the energy trying to do something different, right? Maybe I fear what happens if I give up the old and try something new. So that's a very, very simple cue. When you feel and you say, I can't do it, take a look and just say, that's a big assumption. Another one is they don't get it. They don't get it. That's another cue. That's really saying, yeah, they don't get what I want them to get, and they're not reacting the way I want them to react. So that's just a verbal cue that you're seeing the world through your eyes. And once you do that, say, wait a minute. Yeah, they're not responding the way I want, but instead of saying to them, they're a jerk, say, why is it? What am I not doing that they're not getting? We talked about the circle of anxiety. Am I not managing their anxiety so that they feel more comfortable to make a decision? So those are two things.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Do you have some summary?
Yes. Well, I just wanted to kind of do the wrap up for today. Thanks everyone for kind of coming. Thanks to Andy for coming and giving the talk. Googlers who participated in the coaching sessions.
Give him a nice round of applause.
Yeah.